Two teams vying for precious playoff position in the Central Division. It's a Blues Mammoth crossover today on Locked On.
You are Locked On Mammoth, your daily podcast on the Utah Mammoth, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into a special crossover edition of Locked On Mammoth and Locked On Blues. I'm veteran NHL voice Tom Callahan, joined by longtime Mammoth analyst Robyn Leaño and St. Louis Blues analyst Haley Taylor Simon. We are very pleased to have you on board with us today as we host this crossover episode because these two teams are going to be battling it out for the exact same parking spot, for the exact same position on the highway here as they're trying to get into the playoffs this year. We're going to talk about that today. This episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So last year, the Mammoth were knocking on the door for a while. Looked like we thought they might get in. And then all of a sudden, Haley, St. Louis showed up. They came to the party a little late, but boy, did they make it interesting.
They sure did. I mean, the Blues, they like to do this a lot when it comes to going to the playoffs, where they sometimes wait up until the last week or even last couple of games. But luckily, the Blues were able to get in. They broke their non-playoff streak, their drought, and they were able to get eliminated in the first round. But hey, they made it to a Game 7 double overtime, so at least that's something.
They made it super interesting. And I know Robyn and I were talking if the Mammoth get in, would it have been like that? I think St. Louis really gave it a huge effort. And as you say, I mean, they were one bounce, one break away from getting to round two.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a close game, that Game 7. I personally thought the Blues had it, and I was about to celebrate. And there was this great video that I took of myself about to react, right, from beating the Winnipeg Jets. And in the video, you just see the complete and utter just sadness come across my face as 1.6 seconds left in regulation, and Winnipeg is able to tie it. But I think that we learned a lot about the Jets mainly in that series, more so than the Blues. I think that when you're looking at teams, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but when you're looking at teams in the Central Division that might not be as successful this upcoming season, I think Winnipeg made themselves known for, hey, maybe we're not a consistent playoff hockey team.
One of the things that that I'm curious about and want to get your thoughts on was getting into that stretch into that playoff spot. Tom and I were talking about what it takes to get into playoffs, and I know the Utah Mammoth, they want to be there. And when it came to all the end of it, a hot finish, and you have to finish strong. What are the things that the Blues did right in that stretch?
Robyn, that's a really good question because there was a lot of things that the Blues did right, and that was playing with their momentum. When you look at the roster on the Blues, one of the big players that you'll notice, Dylan Holloway, he couldn't play. He was injured. So you had to have other players on the team step up. You had the fourth line step up. You had Binnington play lights out in net. So you had a lot of players that took on roles. Like you had a Cam Fowler who's played some of his best hockey here in St. Louis. But also, too, you rely on your top talent like a Robert Thomas and a Jordan Kyrou. So overall, this team has players, as I named Robert Thomas, Jordan Binnington, Colton Parayko, Braden Shen, different players that have been Stanley Cup champions. And again, people forget that when the Blues won the Cup in 2019, they were the worst team in the Western Division after January. So they had a really battle to get into the playoffs as it was. So when you have players that are already used to that, I don't want to say adversity, but that's what it is. Maybe that rubs off, but it was magical. I can't deny it. Like sometimes it's a little bit of luck, but that's how they had to play all season. And you can't wait until like the last month of hockey to play that good. But hey, a 12-game win streak, I'm not complaining.
Haley, you make an interesting point because you look at this Coyotes/Mammoth franchise. It's been a long time since they've been to the playoffs as well. So they don't have that run, and certainly not a Stanley Cup to look back on, but 2019 was now 6 years ago. Do you feel like that still reverberates through the organization or maybe just through the fan base at the very least? It's not recent history anymore, and a lot of that core has changed, but do they still kind of carry that with them?
I would still hope it's recent enough for own personal reasons, but overall, I think when it comes to Utah, it's such an interesting team because I'm like a stat nerd, and I look back at rosters and how players do, and I still want to say Arizona, and then I want to say Phoenix. So excuse me if I ever mess it up, but um, when you look back at their history, the team's history, they've had really strong players, they've had strong coaches, and it's not like funny for you in Utah, obviously, or Arizona if you once were a Coyotes fan who became a Mammoth fan. But it just was so unfortunate with some of the players not panning out there and then panning out on other teams. And I saw that track history a lot. But what I will say is that players like a Clayton Keller make me personally, as a Blues fan, very afraid because Utah has a lot of young talent. And I think what I observed, and again, I'm not a fan of the Mammoth. However, watching a good amount of games due to the Blues, I think that I've observed my team and their fan and our fan base being afraid of Utah because Utah, they play a fast game and people underestimated the Mammoth a lot heading into the season. So, overall, to answer your question, I think that there's something special happening right now in Utah, something special enough that I personally cannot count them out this upcoming season.
Robin,
You
you
know what?
look pleased.
No, I was gonna say I'm, always just glad to hear, and I'm pretty sure even maybe some of your listeners out there might have just had a quick heart skip when you hear that when they just hear the name of Chesterfield, Missouri native Clayton Keller.
Yeah, I mean, I would have loved more than anything for him to be with the Blues, but he has such a great opportunity in Utah, and it, it sucks. And I'm hoping one day that's how I feel about the Kachucks, but it's one of those things where he is excelling in Utah and he's playing some of his best hockey. So I wish him personally nothing but the best. I can't say the same about some of the other guys on the team. However, it's always cool to see a guy that's like a hometown guy be successful. And we saw that with Pat Maroon, even before he joined the Blues. You always root for the guys that are from, the area.
This is an interesting crossover to do because these two teams, like I say, are kind of fighting for similar airspace here. Both of them are really trying to establish themselves as playoff contenders and cup contenders moving forward. We've talked a lot on Locked On Mammoth, and we'll get into that in our next segment too, talking about the Mammoth and what they've done and how they've changed over the offseason. But Haley, for Mammoth viewers and listeners who weren't following the Blues this summer, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the highlights for that Blues team? That the adds or maybe the subtractions. What's going to make a difference and an impact for St. Louis?
Well, the Blues lost a lot of talent when trading Zach Bolduc forward, a player that we saw a lot of potential in. And a trade which the Blues then acquired Logan Mailloux from the Canadians. He only played 7 NHL games, didn't do well in them, and he did great in the AHL. So we have Logan, and then the Blues signed Milan Lucic to a professional tryout, nothing official. However, Lucic's agent is also the agent of some other guys on the team. So it makes it quite interesting. Other than that, I mean, we're actually, as we're filming today, by the way, this is the 1 year anniversary of the double offer sheets that Edmonton decided not to match. So I know that's not an addition this off season, but other than that, it's been relatively quiet. I mean, they got Pius Suter, who's a really strong player, good goal scorer, but they got rid of Nick Leddy, who is now a San Jose Shark. Thank the Lord. I said that they need to get rid of Leddy and Justin Folk. Unfortunately, Justin Folk's still on the team. It is what it is. And then we're not going to be seeing Torrey Krug return to the ice this season. And my suspicion is ever so that became announced. But yeah, the Blues, they have a good team as it is, and you just hope that that chemistry and that culture that we saw the Blues have last season just continues.
So, we are going to talk about the Mammoth on the other side of the break, but Haley, I've got another question for you then. Overall, better or worse? We're going to talk about that here in just a second.
I would say personally, and it's not because of any of the moves that they made this offseason, the Blues are a better team than they were a year ago because we saw an improved Dylan Holloway. We saw how good his chemistry is with Jordan Kyrou. You got rid of a liability, to be quite honest with you, with Justin Folk on defense. So that's a positive that he's out. I can't say, though, about the trade with Zach Bolduc and Logan Mailloux. I can't come on here and say it's better because we saw a lot of good out of Zach Bolduc. Logan Mailloux, we haven't seen anything, so I can't say that. I can't say it's good with having a guy sign for a professional tryout because he may not even make the team. And I guess with Pius Suter, that's positive, even though I wish they re-signed Ryan Suter. And they have extended Cam Fowler, so it's better, but with problems.
Locked on crossover today, Blues and Mammoth style. We are going to be talking about the Mammoth here in just a moment. So, hey, if you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, follow along with us. We appreciate you being here on Locked On. And today's show is brought to you in part by Monarch Money. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. That's one of my favorite things about the app. You've heard me talk about this before. I love the fact that everything is right there in front of you. I don't have to bounce app to app to app and then write things down and then try to go back and remember something that I forgot to write down. It's all right there in front of you with Monarch. It makes it so much easier to manage things, not only long term, but day to day as well. One login, one place, one app. Love it. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Tom Callahan, Robyn Leaño, and Haley Taylor Simon. Locked on Mammoth, Locked on Blues crossover today. We'll talk a little bit about the Mammoth here in this segment. Haley, from a Blues standpoint, from Blues fans looking over at the Mammoth, what questions do you think this fan base comes up with talking about this team? Because Robyn and I don't know. I think we have plenty to be excited about. So
There's a lot to be excited about. And one of the players that the Mammoth signed about a month ago, Scott Perunovich, a player that I've had a lot of conversations with here in St. Louis, as well as me actually following along with him with the team, the Islanders that he was on, that he got traded to. So my question to you is, do you see him even fitting into the opening night roster?
That's actually a really good question. It's interesting to me 'cause, like, when I initially saw this signing, and maybe Tom might have a different perspective, is like we saw him as a guy who can kind of help really develop a lot of the guys in the Tucson Roadrunners. So I mean, I'm seeing really him start probably in Tucson. There right now is such a stacked defensive blue line for the Utah Mammoth. It is really hard to get up there and be among the top six. And I think no matter how it cuts down, like Tom, it's right. And you know this, we've talked about it. It's going to be beyond competitive.
It very much is. And looking at, really last year from 35 games, 5 points, has to be a guy who can play defense well. And my first thought with the Perunovich signing was this is someone who fits in that 8 or 9 spot. Maybe what it does, and this would be kind of nice to have for the Mammoth, because I don't know if you know this, Haley, but at one point last year, 4 of the 6 starting defensemen for the Mammoth were out.
Yep.
So you need depth. This is actually a little bit of a paranoid signing in a way, but hopefully that does not happen again. But I look at him as a guy, 27 years old, still upside. A lot of defensemen kind of come into their own in their late 20s. So You like what you see. You know he can handle NHL minutes. I think what this does is it also gives some of the younger defensemen the chance to stay in Tucson and continue to develop so that he becomes the first man up, that first call up for this team. I think he's going to see NHL games this year. Absolutely. I think he will spend some time with the Mammoth. Is it in a full-time role? Unless he comes into camp and just absolutely knocks our socks off, I don't think so. I think he's destined for a split year, but 1 year at minimum. He's an insurance policy and a good one.
There was a lot of signings, I would like to say, for the Mammoth, and one of the players, Nate Schmidt. Now, again, the Mammoth, I'm trying to kind of figure out what they're trying to do. Is this a win now team or is this a let's rebuild team? Because with the amount of players that they signed this offseason, and I want to say so far, just because anything can happen, it just makes me kind of question the direction of where the Mammoth are going.
This is a tailor-made Robyn Leaño question.
It actually is fantastic. No, it's interesting because I have taken a look at what this rebuild was dating from the Arizona Coyotes as coming in phases. And to me, Taylor, I think that this phase is what now is this, as we're starting from this 25-26 season, is our emergence phase. They are ready to go from rebuild portion of this of their rebuild to this is them emerging. This is them getting ready to compete and make it into the playoffs. Not necessarily go and win now. They're not going to go out and try to win a Stanley Cup today, but they're going out to find all the guys to compete, really get at all that depth, start fine-tuning things a little bit to see what works on getting a playoff run, see how far they can get it in.
To me, there's no more excuses. Playoffs are bust. That's the pressure we're putting on them this year. So you go out and you get a Peterka, you mean business. Now you've got a Keller, you've got a Gunther, you've got a Cooley, you've got all these players. You signed Perunovich Melka to a long-term starting goaltender money contract. We'll see if he can be that long-term starting goaltender. But you also have a pretty stacked decor. You picked up Sergachev last year, Dursey, as long as they're healthy. You talk about Schmidt, a guy who his press conference was interesting. He said, you know what? He's like, I'm not the way I was early in my career. He said, now I kind of want to come in and just play where I fit. And I want to be a part of things. I want to help out. I want to mentor the young guys. Wherever you put me is fine. How often or ever do you hear an NHL player say that? Wherever you put me is fine. I'll play.
Yeah, not often at all.
So it's an exciting time for Utah. But here's the thing: we're feeling that updraft of momentum and the emotions of coming off that first year. But so Haley, this is the thing, and I mean the Blues are kind of the bus that's parked right in front of the Mammoth here. And the Central Division, we all know the Central Division is a giant pain in the butt because it is just so good top to bottom.
That's a good answer. And I think that's actually
Oh, we're lost. Haley, we lost your microphone there. Your mic broke up and then it.
This is a playoff or bust team. I like that you said that. So another thing that I kind of want to dive into right now is about the team's identity. You have a name. Congratulations. Utah. I personally like the Utah Hockey Club a lot. But what do you think it means for the fan base? I know this might be a very generic question, but what does it mean to the fan base to have now an official name and to just have an identity, not maybe necessarily with the team player wise, because they have to figure things out, but just organization wise?
I mean, that's also, I'd say another great question, because when I took over, when it rebranded as from Locked On Coyotes to, at the time, Locked On NHL in Utah, my very first episode was breaking down every single team name. And I talked about the importance of what it meant to finally find that identity. And I said, it's for all these fans to be able to have something to latch on, to actually have a name, to kind of take through the community and find find a core to it, find whether it's the phrasing. I mean, look what they're doing right now. They are going full on the hashtag Tusks up. The fans are loving it. And that's, to me, I think that's the most important thing for a fan to be able to attach to that. They can say, hey, I am a Utah Mammoth fan. And you go around, you see someone else is in a jersey, and you just yell out Tusks up because they're having fun with it. It means just so much to finally have an identity.
It's a Locked On crossover episode. We're talking Mammoth, we're talking Blues, and next we are talking about the entire Central Division. Thanks for joining us, everyone, here on this NHL crossover edition of Locked On Mammoth and Locked On Blues. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every single day when it comes to your favorite NHL team. We appreciate you being here. Also, we want to say hey to the everydayers. We love you guys. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the show, welcome. Also, tell your friends if you like what you hear, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe as well. You know what? I have long said, so even when I worked for Nashville, we used to say the Central Division was the toughest division in the entire NHL. And we're talking, so I was there from 09 to 2013. This has not changed, in my opinion, in that time. This division is stacked top to bottom. And that's why it's so hard. We all want to predict ourselves in the playoffs, right? And we say, well, Nashville can't possibly be that bad. They're going to predict themselves back in the playoffs. And like Chicago's coming up, they're going to get back in the playoffs. Not everybody fits in the playoffs. So, Haley, I'll be interested. We'll start with your thoughts here. But I mean, does anyone fall out of the playoffs this year?
Yeah, and it's the Winnipeg Jets. And I know that there's some people that might be like, "Oh, they were the president, winning team, trophy winning team." I understand, but the amount of flaws that I saw in the playoffs blew my mind. And I can respect. Listen, am I a Connor Hellebuck fan? No, my favorite American goalie is Jake Ottinger, but that's not the point. The point is that the Jets, they didn't do much this offseason. They have a team that's relatively older. So no, I don't think that they're going to be a team that's going to have that successful of a regular season. You have so many teams in the Central Division that are really strong and good teams and a lot of young teams. And again, when I'm looking at falling out, I can't confidently say Dallas because Dallas is scary. And I feel like Dallas has been so consistent. And let's face it, Colorado, for whatever reason, they just end up always somehow getting better, which makes no sense to me how they've just been consistently good for years now. But I look at other teams that I think could knock out the Winnipeg Jets. I look at the Minnesota Wild, the Blues, and Utah. Not Nashville. I actually had Nashville finishing in last place last season before the season began, and I'm happy about that just because I thought the money to Steven Stamkos was a bit ridiculous. But Chicago, they still have a few years to kind of be a more relevant team. They have players. They're an original six, obviously, but they're just not developed yet. So I selfishly want it to be Winnipeg. Realistically, it might either be the Blues, the Wild, or Utah that doesn't get in.
It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because I was talking about this very thing about with Topol last week, and we're saying, hey, who is someone who's going to fall out? And there was at least a level of agreement that Winnipeg is going to take a step back. Who knows whether or not they're going to actually make it in. I was making an argument, Haley, for Dallas to be the one that falls out, mainly only because they're still, they gotta have a crazy amount of talent and they're still good, but I feel like there's going to be a heavy amount of fallout from the Peter DeBoer situation, and that's all. That's all I'll say. And everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say the Peter DeBoer situation. It is such a mess from everything that happened there that honestly I don't think they'll survive from it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Robin. And selfishly, again, as I consider right now in this moment Dallas to be the team that always gives the Blues the hardest time, I would love more than anything for them to take a step back. And I won't dive too much into it because we all know what's going on. However, what I will say is I think it's interesting that it's been so far the Jets, now Dallas. I'm curious what Tom thinks, because are you going to break the tie and choose one of these two teams, or are you going to go with the other team that got a top 3 seeding?
Once again, for the second year in a row, it sounds like I'm going to have to get on my soapbox and defend my Winnipeg Jets. For the second year in a row in the regular season, they allowed the fewest goals against. Second straight year. You do not overnight, whether you get a year older or not, become the worst defensive team in hockey. Hellebuck's still good. He might not be a playoff money goaltender. That's fine. But in the regular season, there's no way this team is not hovering around the top of the Central Division. Dallas is going to survive the coaching change, and I think they're better off without Pete DeBoer, to be honest with you. I think they'll get better without him. I'm not a big fan of DeBoer. I think he ruins goaltenders. I watched him do it in Vegas when I covered the Golden Knights. I don't like him as a coach. So I think they're better off without him. That said, so I'll be interested to see what happens with St. Louis this year, the Blues, as far as whether or not they're going to take a step back, because honestly, I don't think they're as strong as they were last year. And the inconsistency in goal is what scares me a little bit, because I like when Binnington is Binnington and he's angry and he's playing aggressive. And I think he can carry a team a long way. I just don't know if he's going to do it over the course of a whole season and what that mix is going to be. However, my pick to not be in the playoffs this year is Minnesota.
My follow-up question based off of your answer, and we'll get into the Minnesota. Why don't you think the Blues are as good heading into this season than they were last season?
So I do worry, again, starting with Binnington. It all really starts and ends with him, because if he's playing well, he carries this team. But if he's not playing well, they're going to struggle. And that's, to me, that's too dicey of a situation. It means your defense isn't stalwart enough. We've seen some pretty average goaltenders win a Stanley Cup in the last couple of years because they had good defensive puck possession teams.
Not the Blues.
In front of, well,
Our defense is trash.
And that's kind of it. Just taking a quick look at it. I mean, you've got Falk tied up. You mentioned Corey Krug. That's $6.5 million of long-term IR. Parayko's wrapped up for a while, but beyond that, I mean, you've got Broberg and Fowler and Tucker.
No. This is not, we're not going to diss Cam Fowler. Cam Fowler was our golden boy last season, and so was 40-year-old Ryan Suter, who the Blues did not resign.
And that's the thing, is Fowler's 33 and Suter's 40. So
yeah, no, I get the age thing, but
I worry about those guys' age, especially. Well, Suter's kind of ageless. Like, he was in Nashville when I was in Nashville, and the guy was amazing. He does so much underrated stuff. But I worry about that. And then the other thing, honestly, like, I look at the Blues up front and I say, well, where are all of the goals going to come from? And so that's honestly the one that, like, I like Buchnevich. I don't know if I $8 million like him until 2031 like him. And I know we're only talking about this year. I get that. I just wonder about the flexibility of the Blues with under $1 million in cap space if something's not going right. That's the other thing. They're kind of hamstrung to start the year off. If things aren't going right, they can only fix it with a trade.
Well, here's the good news, though, Tom.
Okay.
For the Utah Mammoth, this is a very positive situation because the Blues have the most no trade clauses in the NHL.
Oh my goodness.
It's bad. But that's an interesting take, because I think getting a perspective from somebody that's not necessarily a Blues fan and somebody that's able to look at this from the outside and say, hey, these are the reasons why. I might disagree, but on some of the things I could look and say, hey, I do agree. I think that's why these episodes are so important for the listeners, for all of you watching, especially my Blues people watching, because now you're hearing a perspective and it can kind of make us think, wait, did Doug Armstrong kind of screw over the team with all these no trade clauses and the horrible contracts for some of the players? So I do appreciate that.
And honestly, like, that is my first glance knee-jerk reaction, is you have $24 million and change tied up in 3 forwards. Now, not that that's a bad thing if they're all producing for you, but Kyrou, Thomas, and Buchnevich are being paid to carry this team. Are they going to carry the team?
Well, I can tell you this. My boy Robert Thomas is one of the most consistent players, one of the most underrated players in the NHL. Jordan Kyrou, for now 3 consecutive seasons, he has scored 30-plus goals, 70 points the past couple seasons. And then you have Bushi, might have not had the best season last season, but at the end of the day, he's a solid playmaker and a big body. There's so much talent on this Blues team. They need to extend Dylan Holloway. But I guess overall, the difference between the Blues and the Mammoth right now is that the Blues is players that I guess you can say are relatively younger or in that phase of already past development, where you look at Utah, And those guys, they're going to get through this season, where you have a lot of young players that are going to finally have kind of like their breakthrough season this upcoming season. Whereas the Blues, they already had that in the past couple of seasons, and now they're just trying to improve even more. I think Jordan Binnington is one of the better goalies in the NHL. Defense is an issue. Offense, though, this team, I mean, it's scary when you have Dylan Holloway and Kyrie next to each other, but I'm excited. I want it to be hockey season. This has gotten me like fired up right now.
I know.
Oh no,
Rob,
it absolutely can't wait. No,
Rob,
and
oh, go ahead, Robyn.
no, I was gonna say too. Like, I mean, one thing I can't wait for is when it comes down to the end of it, whether or not it is probably again, as we see where it gets, the final game is again between of the season is between Utah and St. Louis, which is something that I think they do on purpose because they know those two teams are probably going to be battling into the playoffs at that point. And who wouldn't love to finish the season with a good old GM battle between Bill and Doug Armstrong?
No, I agreed. I looked at the schedule. I'm like, this is awesome. I think having the final game of the season against these two teams, I'll admit, last year playing Utah, difficult games, good team. I think that this is going to be a battle, but I love when the final game of the season isn't just a throwaway game. And I love when it's down to game 82 and it's the theatrics like a playoff game, but it's not a playoff game. I love that. So I'm not hoping to be in that position. I'm hoping to have a little bit of security, maybe for both of us to have a little bit of security. But at the end of the day, hey, if it's 82 that determines the outcome, then may the best team win.
I wanted that game to matter so much last year, and it didn't.
Who did you end up playing in your final game?
The Blues.
I know.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to say that.
It was embarrassing.
I know.
It was embarrassing.
I just was wanting you to say that.
5-1. Can't forget it. I wanted that game to matter. It did not. But
I just that was the whole purpose.
I mean, it was funny because I think at that point, Tom and I were questioning a lot of different situations on goaltending management. It was like it was however many games straight for
I think it ended up at 22 by the time we were all said and done.
Was Logan Cooley the illegal scorer in that game? I'll have to go back and look.
I had to take a look back at that score sheet, but
either way,
I still have no doubt that whenever these two teams play against each other, I know Bill and Doug are both still sharing a beer, and then whoever's sweet.
Well, Robyn, you know what's funny? When Robyn was hosting the Locked On Coyotes podcast before it became the Locked On Utah and then Locked On Mammoth, it went through a lot of changes.
Oh yeah.
We both talked about the one season where the Blues and the Coyotes at that one time played each other like 3 times within a month. It was something insane. So I am happy that at least it's more spread out this season.
I mean, I remember a season where I forgot who was the Blues host at the time. It was we had a different Locked On Blues host, and I think it was my first season covering the Arizona Coyotes, and that was shortened COVID season when they started in January, and it was the Coyotes and the Blues for 7 games straight. And I was sick and tired. It was like the 7th game in a row. And I'm like, are you telling them, are you as tired of this as we are, as for just going back and forth on this?
Yeah, it was weird, that whole time period. So I am happy now that at least it's spread out and I can at least talk to both of you as the season goes on, and not just within the same couple weeks.
Here's the other fun thing, though, is, we couldn't leave the show without talking about the DNA of both of these teams is very similar. It's draft big, draft physical, be hard to play against. And I think that's why the Blues won the Cup in 2019. I think they were the hardest team to play against. They beat you down, leaned on you, and physically just wiped you out of a series. And that's what now the Mammoth aren't quite direct descendants of that because they have some smaller, shiftier guys too. But Robyn and I have noted on several occasions, Haley, we talk about this a lot. The DNA of that Blue Stanley Cup is a lot of what you find in the vocal blueprint, if you will. Every time Bill Armstrong steps to a microphone, that's what he talks about.
Yeah, and I think physicality does win you cups. And what I mean by that is you can go on and you can say goaltending and defense, offense, but at the end of the day, and we saw this with the Florida Panthers, they were the more physical team, more physical than Edmonton. And to be a physical team, I'm not saying to always be fighting, but it's those hard, heavy hits that slow down the opposing team, which then gives your team the opportunity to have more chances to score on goal. And, I don't want to come on this episode and say I think Utah is more physical. On paper, yes, but I want to see at least a couple preseason games, or at least see how they play within the first couple games before I can make an assessment. But on paper, yes, I can say that they are a more physical team, especially with the additions to their team. And just, obviously I watch a lot of, Keller because, again, St. Louis guy. Yeah, I'm scared. It's a physical team, fast team. That's the one thing I noted. It's a defensively fast hockey team. That's my notes. I have notes down on all the teams. That's my note about Utah. It's a defensively fast hockey team.
It's going to be interesting this year. Robyn, do you have any thoughts or a question you want to pop out there before we wrap her up?
No, I think I think that all end things pretty well. I mean, the only thing I'll say is, glad you just mentioned the blueprint again, because there's a reason I kept mentioning both of the Armstrongs' name. I mean, Bill is essentially a descendant from that Blues organization. So,
Haley, leave us with a bullet point for the Blues. Like, if you're putting up a poster, okay, for opening night Blues, and why do I come see this hockey team? Give me your selling point for St. Louis.
Robert Thomas. Mic drop. That's it. Robert Thomas is the best player on the Blues. He's the most exciting player to watch. He creates the most plays, period. And he is a star. And he's underrated because the national media does not focus on teams that are not the original six or the big market cities. And I will forever preach that. As I cover a team that is in a big market, who is not a good hockey team, they get a lot more national games than the Blues did. So I think for me personally, I think if you want to watch the Blues, if you haven't watched the Blues, if you're a Utah fan and you just want to see what the Blues are like, keep an eye out for Robert Thomas, because this is a player that's going to end up making Team Canada for the Olympics. And he's a player that's going to be really scary to play against.
Robyn, who's on the Mammoth poster?
Logan Cooley.
Oh,
Logan Cooley.
Not Clayton Keller. Logan Cooley.
I love Keller, and I think I think he's all he's all the star they made it to be. But Logan Cooley is the future of this team, no doubt about it.
Bold, I love it.
Really fast, what I will say is, whenever the Blues and Utah played last season, the player that I always do like the player I'm going to fear the most, it was always Logan Cooley. He scares the living bleep out of me because he is that good of a player.
I saw someone, they instantly wanted to do a redraft of the 2022 NHL draft. This is the quickest redraft I've ever seen. And then instantly Logan Cooley gets drafted at first overall. And no doubt about it at this point.
Such a good player.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Want to say thank you to Haley Taylor-Simon, Locked On Blues, Robyn Leaño, and Tom Callahan, Locked On Mammoth. Thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate you being here, and we look forward to catching up with you next time on Locked On.